Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where I talk about the Constitution, history, politics, the culture, and pretty much anything else I want to talk about. This podcast can be found on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, I think Google Play, hopefully iHeartRadio by now, YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. It's out there. And if you want to see on video what we look like, go to YouTube /Annette Talks, and you can see this on video as well. And today I'm starting a series. I don't know if it's going to be 2 or 3 or maybe more episodes on this topic because it's pretty big and it's really timely. But what I'm going to be talking about today is Canadian healthcare. And the reason that I'm doing this is because obviously here in America, we have Mr. Bernie Sanders, who is looking more and more like he may actually be the Democratic candidate for president. And his one of his biggest platforms is Medicare for All, which he's partly basing on Canadian healthcare. And so, and as you'll find out in my next episode, a lot more Americans are starting to say that they want single payer. And so obviously this is something that needs to be discussed, looked at, taken apart, understood. I don't think most people really understand. They just like the idea of free healthcare, free in air quotes. Obviously nothing is free. Oh, so what I'm going to do is with this episode, I'm going to have a personal story from a gentleman who has lived in both America and Canada, experienced both healthcare systems, and went through a really long, difficult process with his wife, who was handled in the healthcare system in Canada. And I won't go into much more detail on that because he's going to tell us his story. And we have Paul Pulsifer joining us. Hi, Paul.
Hey, guys. Happy to be on.
Great. And so you lived in America most of your life, right?
Yeah, raised in Western Colorado. I was born in Iowa, actually. Wasn't there for long because medical school was there with my dad when he was doing that. And then residency for him was in Western Colorado, where I grew up. So.
And your dad's a doctor, right?
Yeah, his degree is in osteopathic medicine. If you ever hear about Dr. Pulsifer in Western Colorado, he owns 2 clinics out there, the Delta County area. He's the head doc at least one nursing home. I don't remember what his position is at the other one. But yeah, he's been in practice for more than 30 years now. I don't remember the exact number. I want to say like 35. He might correct me on that after this. But
so you've had experience yourself with American healthcare, and yourself and your wife with Canadian healthcare, and then you've got a dad who obviously works in American healthcare. So you have a unique perspective on this, and obviously.
And the thing is, now I work as a CNA too, so okay. I'm seeing what happens firsthand in care facilities, in home care. I've seen how it works on both ends, both in like facilities and at home.
Okay, and you're back in the U.S. now.
Yeah, I'm in Orem. Yeah.
All right, so. Obviously, this is one perspective. This is one person's experience. But from a lot of the reading that I've done, it's not terribly unique. So it's not like I went out and had to like go search for someone that's gone through this. I have been doing a ton of reading. And one of the books that I'm reading, I'm holding it up for you on that are watching, False Premise,
yeah.
False Promise. The disastrous reality of Medicare for All. You can see where I'm coming from. Obviously, I'm not a big fan, but this book is just chock full of footnotes, and I've been scouring the web, and I'm not just looking at stuff that supports what I like. I'm going to the Canadian government's website and looking at what they say. I'm looking at every angle so I can get an objective viewpoint.
And there's a lot of stuff even just simply on Wikipedia you can find too. Not all of it's objective, of course, but there's a lot of useful information there too.
Well, actually, I was really surprised because I read a ton of articles and I started reading this book, and then out of curiosity, I went to Wikipedia, and a lot of the same stuff is right there. It's a bit out of date. Some of the statistics on there are a little out of date, but I see the same thing pretty much everywhere I go. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's there's a common theme running through it. So let's get started with your story. So when did you move to Canada?
Okay, so the funny thing with that is going up there to be with Lorraine was actually moving back, because that's where my mission was. I got called to the Canada-Toronto West mission back before it was combined from East and West into the Canada-Toronto mission now. And that's where Lorraine and I met back before there was less than nothing between us. She couldn't stand me at first, but well, that's the story for another day. Listen to episode 40 of Stepping into Freedom Season 1 if you want that.
That's right. I forgot to mention you have your own podcast, Stepping into Freedom, right? And where can
my co-host Jessica Sellers and I are actually, we just finished today before this one, finishing up the last kind of steps for getting ready for the first 3 episodes of season 2 to be posted on that one. That should be out soon. So,
and where can that be found?
That one is the host site is, you can go to paulpulsifer.podomatic.com, or on my personal website, thatwhich perisheth not.com/podcast. You can find it there when I post it.
Awesome.
Yeah, but episode 40 of season 1, you can hear more of that story, which isn't as relevant to this, but.
Okay. Oh, you know what? And before we get there, I also wanted to mention, and tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, but the Canadian healthcare system pays, the government pays about 70% for healthcare for its citizens, and then they pay the other 30% out of pocket or through health insurance that they buy on their own.
Yeah, well, right now, from again, Wikipedia is great, right? About 30% of, private insurance companies, about 30% of healthcare spending nationally.
All right, so only 70% is from the government, 30% is private that they pay for either through insurance or out of pocket.
Which a lot of the time is why when you have a doctor that will tell you, oh, you need this specialized thing. In Ontario, it's called OHIP, Ontario Health Insurance Policy.
Mm-hmm.
In Ontario, you'll find a lot of doctors who, you need this. Oh, but OHIP doesn't cover it.
Okay, right, and because basically the Canadian government pays for it, but each province determines how they're going to handle it and how much care they're going to give. So each province it's like here, if we had every state got to basically administer the program, how they all receive money from the federal government, but then each province determines how they're going to spend it. And also what's not covered are things like prescriptions. So drugs are not covered. I think eye care.
A large number of elective processes are also.
And nursing homes are not covered. So it's not 100%, everything is not covered. And it's not 100% paid for by the government. Where I just have to do a little, this is a little peek into next week's episode, that Bernie's plan is much more ambitious. He wants 100% paid for by the government, except for elective surgeries. That's it. Drugs, everything paid for.
Well, I can't wait to tell you, there's so many reasons why that wouldn't work, and I'll get to that in the conversation I mentioned to you before we started recording here about my conversation with my dad on the way back from Canada, 21-hour drive we had to discuss some things like this.
Right. All right, so let's get back to the story.
Yeah.
You met your wife while you're on your mission.
Yes.
And so, first, but eventually that changed.
Yeah, we'll go from there. So back at that point, she was born with spina bifida, and she thought at one point there was cerebral palsy from what she read in the records, but that's not confirmed to my knowledge. Mm-hmm. We found out about a few years ago actually that she also had a congenital problem they never even mentioned to her, which was something called a Chiari type 2 malformation at C3 in her spine. And it's like the spinal column constricts, and in her case creates hydrocephalus in the brain. And in her case was also pinching off some of the nerves that help control the diaphragm. Wow. Which creates breathing problems, which creates CO2 levels to rise and consciousness issues and a whole bunch of things.
So she had some pretty heavy duty.
No, that's like 3 of 15 different things she had wrong.
Wow.
And this was in the 70s when, she was born in a situation where they didn't think she would live 24 hours because of a whole bunch of complications with pregnancy with her mom and stuff like that. And is the one that said, "Oh, plan your daughter's funeral." They see the past 24 hours, and they kept going like, "Wow, how is she doing this?" Right? So back in 1971, when she was born, they didn't have a whole lot of high-tech medical technology to deal with spina bifida. And so,
she was
anyways,
born and raised in Canada?
yes, yeah, she was
Okay.
born in New Brunswick, and then it was a flight for life when she was born to Quebec. So,
All right.
anyways, after I met her, I'll skip a lot of the fluff behind her story because this isn't what that's about. But I called her after the mission just to touch base because she had helped me with some emotional issues. She had some suicide prevention training, and she used to help me with some of that. So we started talking and got to know each other really well, and decided I'd propose from over the phone 2,000 miles away a few months after talking on the phone. So when I eventually got back up there to stay, I mean, the second our temple stealing had happened in the Toronto temple, Latter-day Saint temple there, the problems just came right up and they just would not stop. She had Crohn's disease as well because of a lot of trauma to her digestive system as a young child. That's not like something the doctors ever said, yes, that is why, but I mean, she tells her story. It's obvious there's a lot of things that contributed to that. One of them was probably that diet problems when she was a kid. But anyways, she also had, she developed lymphedema because of extreme abuse she experienced throughout different parts of her life. And over time, it just kind of, so much physical trauma over time will just make your body start giving out. Some of the systems will just start giving out over time, right? And her lymphatic system was one of them. And so lymphedema kicked up in about 2010. Really severe lymphedema, like her legs went to about 4 times their normal size. And that creates conditions for pressure ulcers, which she got a lot of them on the backs of her legs and things like that, which are additional entry sites for infections. She had something called anemia of chronic disease. The funny thing about this is, in 2015, we took a trip back to my parents' place, Lorraine and I, in Colorado. We took a Greyhound, 3 days out, 3 days back. We'll never take Greyhound again. But during that process, my dad just sat and listened for like an hour and a half. He just listened to her. He didn't run any tests, none of that stuff. And just through listening, which no doctor up in Canada had enough time or patience to do for that long.
That was one of the things that I read too, was that they will only listen to one issue per visit.
Doctors, yes. Lorraine's, thankfully, the last doctor she had, the last family doctor, was actually nice enough to say, if I'm failing to do my job, if I don't at least try to do as much as I can for you per visit, screw the one problem at a time. Call whenever you want. I'll talk to you over the phone. We'll do phone appointments. I'll come to your house whenever I can. And let's resolve everything as much as we can. The only doctor I've ever heard of in Ontario who is willing to do that.
So you guys were in Ontario, which from what I understand is about the worst province for healthcare.
There was one of those maps I saw once that had 1 to 2 words for every province to describe it. And the 2 words they picked for Ontario were bad hockey teams and politicians.
That's funny.
But yeah, so
I hear that it really depends on which province you live in, what kind of healthcare you're going to.
It can, yeah. I've heard people in Alberta say, "Oh, it's great out here," and I've never been there. I'll believe them. Whatever, great. Yeah, Ontario, it's not. But I was telling my dad, she was telling him about all the problems she was having, which was less then than it was even before she passed. And just by listening, he's like, I think you have anemia of chronic disease with all the trauma you've been through, which is why blood transfusions would never work, because the way her blood cells were being produced in her bones was defective, like the process itself. So that's why like her hemoglobin was always low, because her blood wasn't being produced properly in the first place. And so there was that, which can kind of snowball into other areas of which you've already heard. And there was, you ever heard of Charcot arthropathy?
No.
So that one is an issue that can be common in people with sensation issues in their extremities. And for Lorraine, it meant that her bones and her feet would demineralize and be reabsorbed into her blood, contributing to kidney stone problems chronically, which she had a lot. Collectively, I would guess probably 40 kidney stones over the 10-year period.
Wow.
In the last 10-ish that she had were what eventually did the final damage when they broke them up.
Right.
So there was that PTSD from abuse growing up. That's more of a psychological thing, but can affect you physically, right? Tons and tons of allergies, latex allergies, which in the 70s, as you can imagine, would have been a nightmare.
Yeah.
I'm forgetting some things that I'll remember when I'm telling the rest of the
So
story. But
maybe skip up to the last 18 months or so.
okay, so yeah, the last 18 months, she also had a lot of nerve pain problems because of how much like water weight she put on with the lymphedema, like with lymphatic system problems. And so I remember there was one day in the hospital. I'll get to this part because this was kind of what snowballed eventually into the end. She had this one day. It was the end. It was the last day of August of 2017, I believe, 17 or 18. I think no, yeah, it would have been 2018. And she had a sleeping disorder because of the PTSD. That like she wouldn't sleep well at night, let alone during the day. But one day, that day, she just fell asleep, and like it was around 12:30, and she was not waking up. We were like, shaking her around and yelling, and she was not waking up. And so the nurse came in to take her vitals. Could this be an infection? Could this be CO2 levels? Everything was normal. So we're like, okay, I guess we'll just let her sleep, I guess. And so about 4:30, 5 o'clock, one of the nurses comes in. Fantastic nurse. Kudos to Leela if you hear this. And was a little enough that I was willing to be and woke her up. But when she woke up, she felt like there was this like pulsating extreme nerve pain, just do, like going through her head and her neck. And there was this like painful dinging in her left ear, like Voldemort on surround sound. And like the room was swimming, and she felt like she was coming up out of anesthetic, all this weird neurological stuff going on. And the neurologists, they came in, they could not figure it out. All they could figure out is how to medicate the symptoms. And so past that point, her CO2 levels would consistently get elevated over periods of time. Also partially because of so much pain she was in. She was on high levels of opioid painkillers. For those who understand the pharmaceutical part of this, she was at one point on 4 milligrams every 4 hours of the short-acting hydromorphone, which is extremely high.
So do you think that they were giving her a lot of pain meds because they couldn't figure out what to do with her, or they didn't know?
Mostly, yeah. Most of the doctors out there were at a loss because the healthcare system had made her wait so long to get several things figured out that by the time any family doctor was looking at this, first of all, they were going from scratch with every new doctor. We had to rehash everything every time, and it was a massive story. Like every doctor, what's your healthcare history? Really? Here we go again, right? And since they're starting from scratch, every new guy, it's like the time it takes them to figure it out was worse and worse every time because more was going wrong and more added onto it, more stacking up every time. So it was just this endless death spiral of no one being able to figure out anything, because even like the very end, Dr. Laura Wright, by the way, kudos to her for this. She was the only one who actually paid enough attention. Had she come on to Lorraine's case a few years earlier, she might have actually been able to extend Lorraine's life longer had she known beforehand.
Okay, my understanding is that if you have something life-threatening, you can get in fairly quickly to the hospital. That's not a problem. But the problem is trying to get in to see a doctor, or especially a specialist, if it's not life-threatening, that you end up with wait times that are...
Well, yeah, and part of the problem with that is, and I'll tell you kind of, this goes into what I told my dad on our 21-hour drive back from Ontario to Colorado. He was asking me about, nurse to patient ratio, hospital to population ratio, and 13% tax in Ontario. It's just not enough, especially when we were in Hamilton there, 600,000 people. You would think, what, a dozen and a half, 2 dozen hospitals? Five hospitals for 600,000 people.
Right.
And not only that, but one of the wards that we were in there, it was the acute medicine ward on B3 in Juravinsky. Bless the nurses there for the crap and the hell they go through, because I think it was like between 16 and 22 patients at any given time usually, and 3 nurses, 3 RNs for that many patients, and 2 of them, the last year I was there, were CCU beds. They were critical care beds. So there had to be one of those 4 nurses constantly at the monitors. They could never leave. Someone had to be there constantly. So everyone had to be trained for CCU beds. And my dad's like, that is an absolute disaster waiting to happen. I'm like, and it was.
So basically, shortage, not enough doctors, not enough hospitals, not enough nurses.
And one of the urologists who actually, one of the times they went in to bust up some of the kidney stones, it was only because I had called, and this is a big no-no. I did it anyways because I'm preserving Lorraine's life. I called OR booking myself. And I was like, look, she's asleep again. Her O2 levels her CO2 levels are high. She's going to sleep again. She has really bad infection because of the kidney stone. You guys have been putting off taking out for a week. And now she's like, give her 24 hours. She may not see the light of day again, right? I called them, and actually one of the few times I actually said, you might face legal action if you don't get this taken care of today. Within an hour, they had her down there in OR after that call.
So you had to threaten legal action to get her in.
Which, even if I had carried that out, it's next to impossible because doctors are treated like God up there.
Uh-huh.
And so
I have to throw in a few statistics in here. I'm making pause for a second. But this is some of the things that they talk about in this book of some of the shortages, which happens when you ration care. And this is one of the big issues with single payer, obviously, because if you say everyone, you have unlimited, we're going to cover you for everything. Well, obviously, if you have unlimited demand and limited supply, you're going to have a shortage and you're going to have rationing. Yep. So this is some of the things that they talk about as far as not having cutting edge treatments or technologies like CT scanners. It says in 2017, Canada had less than 16 machines for every million people, whereas the US has 42 million, United States has 42 per million people instead of 16, so 2.5 times. Less than 15% of rural emergency departments, which serve 20% of Canadians, had a CT scanner in 2017. Each of the 3 countries' northern territories had just 1 scanner in total. And it says it's no wonder the average wait for a CT scan across the country is more than 4 weeks. And even when Canadians can get CT scans, there's almost a 1 in 4 chance that the machine being used is over 10 years old. And this goes on and on about MRIs, the same problem with, and then drugs, because they have price controls on drugs, which are not covered, but they have price controls. It says, so many of the most cutting edge drugs are in short supply in Canada, if they're available at all. One analysis of 290 new medicines brought to market between 2011 and 2018 showed that less than half were available in Canada. US patients had access to 89% of those new drugs. The numbers are even more dire in specific categories of treatment. Of 21 new treatments for blood disorders introduced between 2011 and 2018, Canadian patients had access to just 14%. All 21 were available in the United States. Canadians have access to less than half as many new central nervous system therapies as Americans. Only 59% of the 82 new cancer drugs are available in Canada, whereas 96% of them were accessible to American patients. So it goes on and on about with those kind of things. Obviously, the quality of healthcare is not the same.
No, the thing is, you mentioned the access to medications. Neurology at that day in September when they came in, the beginning of September of 2018, trying to figure out what to do. You know what they prescribed to help her with the nerve pain? Something for seizures.
Oh.
That was their best shot. That's it happens to cover that category too, this specific drug. And I'm like, really? You're giving her something for seizures to control nerve pain. And apparently to Lorraine, it helped a little bit. It helped dull it a bit, but it caused so many side effects. It's like, what's the point?
Right.
So, I mean, there was that. And then
with your story.
Yeah, go ahead. That's fine. So I appreciate the information. I got to get that book myself, actually. Anyway, so what happened is they took her down there that day, right? And what I was mentioning with the urologist, with lack of funding to get what they want to do done, the next, after they had finished the surgery that day, the urologist, don't laugh, his name was Dr. Wang, and he laughs about it himself. He kind of jokes about such a nice guy. But he came out and he said, I have to tell you, You made the right decision with that phone call. If you hadn't have made it, we just drained so much infection out of her, she wouldn't have lived till tomorrow morning.
So if you had played by the rules and done what you were supposed to do or expected to do there,
she would have been dead.
Yeah.
Because, and what he told me was, interesting thing, he says, you know what? If the government would or could pay for it, we would be working 24/7, all day, all night. We wouldn't even be taking meal breaks. We want to do more, but they won't let us because, oh, you're there in the hospital, we pay the hospital, you work for the hospital, you're not allowed to do what you want to do because we have to pay you, and we can't.
It's rationed care. And also they do not allow private pay. Like you can't, as a patient there, walk into a doctor and say, I want to pay you extra. And you can
there was a lawsuit about that in British Columbia where this doctor wanted to open up private pay options. Mm-hmm. And he got in big trouble with the government. They were trying to pass legislation for it, and he tried to sue the BC government. I'll talk more about that later too. We'll get back to the story in a second, but he tried to sue them for that very thing. Like, so, because people, well, I want to pay for it. Give me it now. No, right? So anyways, what happened after that was I realized, okay, well, I have to keep breaking rules here in order to keep my wife alive. And so that's one of the reasons why we're so grateful when Dr. Laura Wright came on, because, you know, when she finally learned the whole history, she actually did do what my dad did and listened for like a while. And oh my gosh, okay, we need to have you see this person and that person, and we're going to get you all these specialists we can. She had a pain specialist and something for her eyes, and because they were going downhill, like a whole bunch of stuff. But the problem was there's only much she could do even on that end, because as you've mentioned, like to me in preparation for this podcast, wait times for specialists are even worse. And so, I mean, she saw one pain specialist, Dr. Park. He was great, but even then, there was only so much he could do, because it's like, oh, well, we kind of attacked the pain problem a little bit too late now. There's more that needs to be done preventatively that I can do to manage your pain until some of the problems themselves are lessened. There's too much going on here. I can't fix it all.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem. If you can't get in soon enough, things become exacerbated, and then it's too late. And or you end up going into the ER and hoping that they can help you, and it's not too late.
Well, and speaking of ERs too, I remember going in there one time. I had called an ambulance one of the many times I did that, and we go, like, the ambulance takes us there, and she goes into the stretcher in through the ER waiting room, and one of the few times I was actually grateful that I called an ambulance instead of going there ourselves first, into like when you just walk into the ER, because when we went through that waiting room, I kid you not, there was standing room only, like barely. Like, there was, I don't know, 20 people in the ER standing, and all the seats were completely taken. We just zipped right through, thankfully, back into the emergency department on the stretcher. But even then, there are hallway patients, all over the place.
Something else I read is that there are patients that get stuck in the hallway. They're treated in the hallway, and they're stuck in the hallway. And I read that one guy actually, they stuck him in the bathroom. That was his room. He says it was really weird because my head was next to the toilet. But he says, at least I didn't have to hear the moaning from all the other patients, so I could sleep. But treated in the hallway, stuck in the bathroom, these are not stories you hear in the U.S.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, I just had a friend up in Ontario who just talked to me a few weeks ago, and they were in the hospital, like in ER, waiting to get up to in a room that they said they were, okay, we've admitted you. We're just waiting for the room, right? She was discharged before they even had the room available.
Oh, gosh.
Seriously, and so, finally the doctor came in and told this person, oh, I'm so sorry. We're really working hard. We're trying to, which they always are. They're just understaffed and underpaid.
They try really hard with what they've got to work with.
Yeah. And the doctor told this friend of mine, oh, I'm so sorry. The hospital is at, get this, 130% capacity right now.
Wow.
I'm like,
that's the problem. If you can't get in to see a regular doctor, and so you wait till your condition gets bad enough that you have to go to the ER. So of course you have all these people in the ER. They should not be there if they had been able to get into a regular doctor or specialist. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's how it was. I remember there was, how often, I don't know how often you're in hospitals, but do you know how often, as a CNA, I have heard code white, code blue, code yellow in hospitals, which is missing person, violent patient in Ontario, at least. And when someone blacks out, right?
Uh-huh.
So every hospital or facility I've been here, I haven't heard a single code when I've even been visiting or
Wow.
just walking through.
Mm-hmm.
In Canada, in Ontario, in the hospital Lorraine and I were in, there was at least, 1 to 3 code whites a day, violent patients.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 2 or 3 code blues, a code red 2 or 3 times a week, which was fire. I'd say maybe a code yellow every day or two, which is missing patient. Like, they're all over the place.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Because there's just not enough staff to keep everything safe and healthy and proper. There's not enough.
Right.
You can't afford it.
Yeah. All right, keep going with the story.
So, okay, so with Lorraine's story here, the crazy thing that happened is with one problem exacerbating another, was that, like, there was one doctor she had, I think I'm okay. I'm going to mention his name, Dr. Kara, because there's a lot of people who don't like him from the reviews on his website. And this guy was a pill pusher, and he always blamed every single problem Lorraine had. Oh, it's woman problems. It must be that time of the month. It's like, are you kidding me? Her legs are extra red today. Oh, they're always red. It's like, and you're not caring more about that? Why?
Well, we have to acknowledge the fact that obviously Lorraine was a very unique individual and that she
This is true, yes.
So many problems. And we don't have any way to say how she would have been handled in the US because she wasn't. It was all
I know nothing about exactly how many funds are allocated where in Ontario, but my best guess is they probably spent, and at this point wasted, I'd say $5 to $10 million at the minimum on her healthcare over the 10 years.
Wow.
Probably.
And I think if she had been seen more quickly by the right specialists at the right time, that a lot of that could have been saved.
Oh, absolutely. Like, there's a here in the Intermountain Healthcare Hospital in Utah County. I've kind of taken a walk through there myself a little bit and looked at the different departments they have. There's a department in there specifically for people who had exactly Lorraine's issues. What do you call it? The bariatric wound care? I forget the terms for it, but it's like specifically big people who have lots of swelling due to lymphedema, specifically, if I'm not mistaken,
So she
who have chronic skin ulcers. That's what the entire the entire like unit on that part of the hospital was for. That kind of person. Like, oh my gosh,
that didn't exist in Ontario that you know of.
Like, it's unheard of. Something like that, like specifically for overweight patients. That's not their fault. Chronic skin ulcers, lymphedema, bariatric stuff. It's like specifically for that kind of situation. One ward for that. It's like, I have never heard of that anywhere in Canada.
Wow.
I'm like, oh my gosh, she could have used that. Like, this would have prevented so many problems.
Yeah. All right, let's try and let's skip up a little bit closer to where things ended up.
Yeah. So the way things were ending at the very end was
And I apologize because I know this is really difficult for you because.
No, that's okay. No, I know she wants her story to.
You lost your wife.
She wants her story to get out there. I know, so that's fine.
Okay.
And anybody that this story can help, make better decisions is great too. I'm sure she'll appreciate that. But what happened was she was admitted to, back and forth kind of between CICU and ICU, cardiac ICU, right? Between the two ICU units on the different floors in Juravinsky Hospital there. Because these infections just kept coming back through the ulcers, because of kidney stones, because of this inflammation everywhere. She had a PICC line in, and those can be sites for infections to easily get in there. She had to have a suprapubic catheter when she actually broke her foot in the hospital. That's another story. So she couldn't weight bear anymore, and there was no way to treat it with the lymphedema. There's no way to treat the bone. So back and forth between ICU and CICU, infection after infection. I remember one night I woke up at about midnight and they're saying, you need to leave right now because we need this whole big old huge room with this big old team of nurses to hook up like dialysis and 3 different industrial strength antibiotics and the ventilator and the mask, and like they had to put a trach in at one point, and this heating blanket and CRRT dialysis. It was just a big mess. I come back in a few hours later, her pulse is at 37. Her blood pressure is like really low. Her breathing is shaky. The doctor says she may not last overnight. Like, she's been like this before. You're wrong. She pulled out of that one fine. It was okay.
So
But that
it sounds like she was getting all sorts of care. So why do you think it ended the way it did? I mean,
just because they caught it too late. They dealt with so many different problems way, way, way too late.
Yeah.
They weren't dealing with enough different things at the same time soon enough. And so because of this, right, the only thing they could do is what they had the money to pay for. And so the last time that happened, they had just removed almost 10 of them, I think, between both kidneys, the stones. They finally, I kept saying, you need to do it now. You need to get rid of them now. Please do it now. And so finally, when they got her in, they put her on those 3 industrial strength antibiotics during the procedure to try and prevent infection from coming when they busted these stones up. And when she got out, within about 12, 18 hours, she was breathing on her own. She didn't need the ventilator on 100% through her trach. But so they too soon. They're like, okay, she's fine. Let's send her up to the acute medicine ward instead of CICU. Too soon though, because literally like maybe 6 hours, not even, after she got up to that other ward, once again, back asleep, CO2 really high, infection level signs again. Like, oh, get her back down there right now. We were wrong to bring her up here, kind of thing, right?
mm-hmm.
And so about 3 or 4 in the morning, she goes down there. They hook her right back up to the CRRT dialysis, right back up to the ventilator, 100% support, same industrial strength antibiotics, 3 even going. She had inotropes running with the lines wide open. And at that point, the doctor's like, once again, we're at this point for like the 4th or 5th time during that admission, which is about 7, 8 months admission. And that was the day where they're like, you know what, we really don't think she's going to make it this time. I'm like, I know you've said that before. I want to have faith. And, you know, from a religious standpoint for us, she had been given promises according to what we believe in our faith about being healed and things like that. So I was sure she's going to be fine. And then when her heart stopped the first time, you know, I was like, please ask God to restart your heart. And it restarted, which was great. But at that point, I'm like, oh, maybe I better call some people. And so at that point, you know, the doctor, like, it didn't stop again until we end up having to pull the plug. And ironic part of that coming up. But what happened was her blood pressure just kept going down and down slowly, ever so slowly. And when it was about, I would guess 70 something over 40 something, I was like, okay, I don't know how she's going to come back from this. It's never been this low, along with everything else. Like her oxygen saturation was down at like 70, 80%, 60, 70%. And her blood pH, usually that's supposed to be between like 7.25, 7.35. Hers was 6.8, which is considered incompatible with human life.
So you could see that she was basically failing.
Yeah, it was usually her whole body, her skin was changing color, you know, the whole bit. You know, you look forward when someone's dying.
I can't imagine.
She was going cold, the whole thing. And so, yeah, anyways, our bishop at church came in and gave her what we call a priesthood blessing and said those words you never want to hear in a priesthood blessing: I release you from your mortal life. And anyways, from the medical standpoint, one of the infectious disease specialists who came in, who worked at the hospital, bless her heart, Dr. Peason, she was so good. She tried so hard to do what she could. And she came in afterwards because she was the head of, you know, the team for that part of the medical team. And she didn't say the word, but she should have. Malpractice. Because she said, you know, I'm pretty sure you already know this, but the reason this happened was because they just waited too long to take out those stones. That is exactly why this happened. And so when they did, her body just can't respond to this much acidity. Can't do it.
You
They
know,
waited too long.
that raises a question. Is there much malpractice in, I mean, are there many malpractice suits in Canada and do they go very far? I
I
have not read that far on single payer and what happens in those situations.
I have heard of people who do it. They're few and far between. I heard tons of stories, like that you have to keep details, nurses can only see so much when you're in the hospital, but I've heard stories from nurses that, where it has happened, but it's from in Ontario, at least from what I have seen personally, it's rare because like I said, they treat the doctors up there like God. And especially when you have medical decisions for funding being made by those without medical degrees.
Mm-hmm. Bureaucrats.
Yeah, I mean, what was it when Doug Ford wanted to take away funding for sedation during a colonoscopy?
Oh gosh.
I'm like, you first, man.
Yeah, I was going to say, hello, you don't see that would make people not go in for colonoscopies and then end up later in the ER with colon cancer that would have been caught and treated maybe or prevented. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so that's what did it.
okay, so do you think that if Lorraine had been if she'd grown up here in the States, gone to doctors here, do you think it would have made a difference?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, without question. Like the one signal already that I mentioned, the department in Intermountain Hospital, but that would, oh my goodness, I just kept thinking of that. If she could have been admitted there, we could have solved all of this years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But just it's not a thing they have up there. It's like, oh, well, we'll try you on the acute medicine ward. We'll try you on a CICU. And the thing is, they actually did offer long-term care facility to us, which may have been more helpful at a certain point. But at that point, it came back to, but if I go there, we're starting all over again.
Right.
And we're asking people to do, but this time it would have been more involved care that I had been doing 24/7 for 10 years straight. And when you have as many minute details of every day with how her legs have to be moved, she had a bone on bone on the inside of her left knee. And because of that, and they couldn't cast it or treat it because of the lymphedema, you have to move her legs a certain way to make sure her pain isn't unbearable so that she can actually be willing to do what she needs to do to have her ulcers treated.
Sounds like you probably knew way, way, way more about what needed to happen than the doctors there, just simply by virtue of the fact that you were with her, taking care of her all that time.
Well, and I was told my boss when I was hired here in Orem, she's like, well, why do you want to do CNA work? I'm like, I have been doing 10 times more than any CNA will ever do in their entire life for 10 years for free.
Right.
This is child's play for me, okay?
Well, so that also makes me wonder how much worse off she would have been if she hadn't been married to someone that was putting in all that time with her.
And from a religious standpoint, my motivation was I made promises, I made covenants, period.
Right. So what to try and wrap this up a little bit, what else has your dad said about it when you talk to him about the differences between species here and in what you saw in Canada?
Well, the first thing he mentioned to me was I was giving him a bigger picture of this. He goes, so basically, we already touched on, you and me, like there's understaffed and underpaid. There's no motivation to really, I mean, the people who actually are motivated to really provide the care they can, at least they're allowed to perform under the government's funding. There's just not enough motivation to really be that kind of person. Those who are, it's like they're like so rare that it's like you have to search and search and search to find the nurse and the doctor who's not going to do everything they can do without biting your head off or saying, oh, I won't do this, I might lose my job. Some nurses will do that. Some nurses will take the risk. And they'll do things that maybe, oh, I'm not supposed to do this, but don't tell anyone because I want to help you. It's like, you're kidding me? You're helping me out. I ain't gonna tell a soul. Screw the system.
They have to sneak around the system to do stuff that could be not only allowed, but
And how many times I have mentioned the phrase to doctors up there in hospitals, I'll call and be like, let me ask you this. What's more important to you people, a policy or a person? And most of the time, well, it's kind of, no, it's not complex. Don't give me that bull crap. If you care for people, you will fight the system
because that's
with
what
me.
the system, that's the problem with this kind of a system. And just as another sneak preview into next week, when I tackle the whole idea of single payer Medicare for all and the issues with it, at the end of my episode, or maybe another episode if I don't have enough time, I'm going to talk about what can be done that's better, because there are better alternatives. We live in America. We have economic freedom, or at least we've had economic freedom. We can do better than this. They always want to rush to, how can the government do this? That's not what we do in America. It's just funny because in Canada, I read that they highly prize their healthcare system, like above the Canadian flag, above hockey, and above the Queen. Like they named their man of the year, I can't remember his name now, but the guy that started single payer way back in the day. Like they think it's awesome. Like they pride themselves on their federal.
Well, and there were actually quite a few Canadians up there, of course, the healthy ones, right? Well, you should be grateful for this. Like, you know how much you would have paid to have all this done? I'm like, and it's not working, is it? So what use is them paying for it anyways?
So I want to wrap this up by saying, obviously, there are a lot of good things that go on up there in Canadian healthcare. Everyone has access. Although I do want to mention a footnote here that I did read somewhere that there are a couple of populations that are failing. The Inuits are supposedly not, so their native Canadians are not receiving the healthcare they're supposed to. And I can't remember the other population, but poor people obviously are receiving less care because they can't afford the 30% that they have to provide out of pocket or private. But there are good and bad things about Canadian healthcare. And so it's not a magical, wonderful, wonderful system where everyone's covered and everyone gets all the healthcare they need, like Bernie Sanders is trying to kind of make it out as. That there are really long wait times, that they're missing out on a lot of cutting edge technology, that you can't get the drugs that you want. And so just overall, you don't have the higher quality healthcare that we all seek. I mean, obviously you don't always get that in America either. I'm not saying America's got the perfect healthcare system. We don't. And I will be talking about that next week. However, Canada is also not a wonderland of healthcare either.
Yeah, like the healthy people who would tell me, be grateful for it. It's like I would sometimes when they were patient enough to listen, I would say, look, this is how complicated this is that you have no idea about. And the very few of them would say still say, well, you should still be grateful because it's just a great system. I'm like, tell me that when you're dying because they didn't take care of you fast enough.
Yeah. No, there are stories after stories after stories of people who they waited too long, ended up in the ER, and end up either dying or going home and just living with their condition because they can't be seen. And so your story is not unique, but I think Canadians grow up with it and they're sort of indoctrinated with the idea that this is so great. And so that's what they think. And that's why I wanted to bring you on, because you've seen both sides.
Yeah. And I hated, to be honest, I actually hated having to pull out the Rottweiler, persona every time Lorraine asked me to. But when she was in enough pain where she was actually screaming, you do something now. And sometimes once or twice on the phone with the medical professionals, they would hear her screaming at them from across the room as well. And only then did they ever say, okay, you know what, I'm going to try and make a few calls and jump through a few hoops for you. Only then did they ever do that.
So you obviously had to play her advocate and it sounds
and be the bad guy.
Yeah, it sounds like you went through a lot just trying to get the care that she needed.
Yeah, the thousands upon thousands of phone calls. I remember there was one lady, if I may, sorry, real quick, who actually told me, and she was from the States, ironically enough, during this process. And she's like, have you tried this? Have you tried this? Have you tried this? I'm like, yes, they won't do it. And she goes, well, maybe, and then she said this phrase, maybe you just don't want it bad enough. I'm like, are you kidding me?
To try really, really hard and push really, really hard to get something that we expect as just a normal thing here. I mean, if you have health insurance here, sometimes you have to fight to get it. But when I call up to see a doctor, I've never not been able to see a doctor here. And
I
I've
told her.
had to wait for months.
I told her, do you know how many thousands upon thousands of phone calls and people I've chewed out and told, like, there's a few people I told VON, Victorian Order of Nurses, there's a few people I called their office and said, you need to fire this nurse right now because of what they just did to my wife, period.
So,
I've said that to people because of how crapshoot they're not motivated to do enough sometimes to help.
yeah. Or their hands are tied. So,
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Paul. I'm sorry you had to go through all that, and nothing I can say to say how sorry I am that you lost Lorraine, and especially the idea that she could have lived longer or better life if she had been in a different healthcare system. I know that's got to be intensely frustrating.
Yeah, and to make things worse, we lived under the poverty line for all 10 years. So.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your story, and if you haven't written about it, I suggest that you write about it, you know, and maybe share it in blog form, or if nothing else, just to share what you went through. So, all right.
Well, again, episode 40 of Stepping into Freedom. You'll hear more about it there if you want.
Right. And remind us again where you can find Stepping into Freedom.
Either paulpulsifer.podomatic.com or thatwhich perisheth not.com/podcast.
Great. Send me those links and I will include them in my show notes.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, Paul. And thank you for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness. Again, you can find this podcast on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, etc. You can also find me on YouTube /Annette Talks and Facebook /Annette Talks. Please feel free to comment on any of those places that allow comments. Let me know if there's something that you want to hear about. You can also email me at Annette@AnnetteTalks.com. I'm always looking for input, critiques, criticisms, whatever. I would love to hear from some of my listeners. Thank you again for listening.